All right, it's 3 o'clock. Let's call the meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. Please silence your cell phones, and I'll call roll. George McQuistion here. Brian Fitzsimmons. Betsy Brunstetter. Present. Donna Cervantes. Present. Jorge Charnico.
Present.
Matt Guillory.
Here.
John Robison.
Here.
Ben Sellers. Jeff Struble. We have a quorum. Item 2, approval of the minutes. I have a question about the minutes. Item 6A, the motions show, there were 2 motions, and they showed that I seconded the motions, which I don't believe I did. And it was probably either Donna, Matt, or Ben on, okay, so we'll check on that. Do we have a motion to make that change and then approve the minutes with that change?
Motion to make the change.
Okay, that was Jarnico and seconded by Brunstetter. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Item 6A, 615 Northwest 7th Street. Michael?
This item is a request to construct a single-family home on a lot that is currently vacant but was recently cleared pursuant to a CA that the Commission issued earlier this year. The applicants proposed a project that meets all the applicable guidelines and regulations with a couple of exceptions. One is that they're proposing some wood siding, and I do want to make clear that it is cedar tongue and groove wood siding and not knotty pine as referenced at the top page 3. So it is cedar pine, but we have indicated that through our staff report that's a pretty common use of material in some of the contemporary homes there that are being built in Cottage District. So that's an item that we've indicated favor with to the Commission. And secondarily, they are proposing a home that does not meet the guideline for a 24-inch elevation above grade for the walk-up entry at the front of the house. And again, due to the contemporary design of the home, it's pretty common that those homes do not include that type of a feature, and the Commission has approved other contemporaries in the district with less than 24-inch elevation. So we are also supporting a deviation from that guideline as well. And in conclusion, we're recommending approval of the project to the Commission.
Michael, I had a question about the Galvalume metal wall panels. There have been some, I know in some of the some of the homes in the Cottage District, we've made the comment, or there have been made the comments that they should be of a certain quality. Do we have any information on what they're planning to use?
It's similar material to others that have been used in the district and approved. Galvalume's a pretty high quality material, stands up well to the elements. We've not experienced any negative feedback from the use of that material in the past. Unfortunately, we didn't include any specification sheets for you on that material, but we have done that in the past, and it's not something that we have had any negative feedback on. So.
I'll just make a point, and Jorge, not to put you on the spot, but I know that Jorge and I think Brian before had identified the Galvalume maybe at the home near 8th and Classen. Jorge, maybe you want to speak to the issue. I don't really know what I'm talking about.
I think the concern at the time was that the profile selected seems like something that you would, I think the term I used was something that you would see in a barn. I didn't know if there was any sort of standard for an architectural finish versus the finish that they've submitted. So that was the concern at the time. So my issue was not with the material itself, but rather than the profile that they had selected.
Like the depth of the ribs, or?
Well, just it's the curvilinear rib versus, an arc. I don't know. To me, I wouldn't. It's a judgmental call, judgment call, but it's not the most refined level of aluminum panel.
No.
We did not include a cut sheet. We can, and the applicant is here. They can probably describe further. The committee has quite a bit of discretion on what they think is appropriate.
Well, if the applicant wants to come up, I don't want to hang up the application based on this, but I would like to get a little bit of information on it.
Mike, I had just a quick question on you made the comment that they've changed woods, and I was reading, and I can't read and listen at the same time.
They didn't change woods. We included an errant reference in our staff report. So the proposal is, as it reads at the bottom of page 2, and that is a reference to cedar tongue and groove wood material.
That's what they're gonna
we
use.
have, at the top of page 3, erroneously referenced knotty pine, and they're not using knotty pine.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah, I've seen that before where it's been asserted that knotty pine is stronger than cedar, and there's a difference between strength and durability, and knotty pine's definitely not as durable. And I'd also like to know what grade, am I getting ahead of you? I am, yes. I can ask my question
Okay.
later.
My name's Kayla Baker. Address is 816 Northwest, or North Francis. Sorry, I keep moving. The Galvalume metal that we were looking at would be, the one we picked out was from MBCI. It's a 24 gauge. It will not be the exact same style that is on the house that is on Northwest 8th and Classen. Will not. And I have rib height on this one 3/4 of an inch, rib spacing 6 inches on center, and I kind of have a picture pulled up if you want to look at it. I don't have it printed out in color.
So I'm going to ask a question of you. Is this something that you reference in your document has been used elsewhere in the neighborhood? Is it a similar profile to what they're speaking?
I believe so, yes.
Did you want to see a picture of it, or?
I think that if it's been used elsewhere, I'm somewhat familiar.
And we're going to try to limit the fasteners. There's going to be exposed fasteners, but we will try to limit the amount of them. And we will probably go with the dark charcoal color.
I just think it'd be good if we defined what that architectural finish was for future reference. I don't know that there's a definition of it. So I think based on what I'm reading, what I've read before, it would qualify, but I think we need to probably fine-tune that a little bit.
What are I didn't even think about that. What are the fasteners? Are they the little neoprene gasket, metal screw type fasteners?
To be honest with you, I do not know. They will blend in with the metal.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they will. The question I have is how long they hold up.
I will have to ask the manufacturer what they recommend, and we would use what they suggest.
All right, are there any other, I don't think we have an issue with the 24 inches above grade for the floor. We've never had an issue with that before. Were there any other questions or comments for the applicant? Okay, any motions?
I'll move we approve it.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion by Robison, second by Charnico. All in favor say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's
Thank
approved.
you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
All right, 6B, 622 Northwest 6th Street.
Yes, this is a proposal to demolish a single-family, actually it's a duplex structure that exists on the south side of Northwest 6th Street between Dewey and Lee. It's a building that has suffered some damage from vagrants and homeless people that have been trying to occupy it and break into the building. There is 24-hour video security on the site, and a lot of the windows have been boarded up to try and prevent unauthorized access to the structure. However, that seems to have failed the property owner, and they're still having problems with that. So we've done what we typically do with the demolition request in the Cottage District, and that is to point out the status of this building per the intensive level survey, and provide you the description of the structure and its condition per that survey, and then leave it up to the commission to determine whether or not they feel that the structure is significant to the city or the district, and if it is or is not, and based on that determination, to make either a denial or of approval of the request to demolish the structure. We have received, since the agenda packet went out, 3 letters in support of the demolition of this structure, and we placed hard copy of those letters at the dais for you to read, if you hadn't seen them already from the email that we sent when we got them. But that pretty much concludes our presentation. We're prepared to respond to any questions you may have.
George, I'm going to recuse myself from this one. While I'm not involved in this project, I am involved with the applicant on other projects.
Okay, thanks, Ben. And I'll just make the comment that the letters were, the 3 letters were from neighbors saying that they thought the neighborhood would be improved, given the vagrancy, et cetera, associated with this, with the property. Any comments, questions for Michael or for the applicant?
Ready with the motion.
Okay, could I have a motion, please?
I move approval of the
Okay.
demolition.
Okay, do we have a second? Brunstetter, and seconded by Struble. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's approved. Thank you. Okay, item 6C, 812 Northwest 8th Street.
This is a proposal to provide some serious renovations to an existing structure on the south side of 8th Street between Francis and Shortell. This house was constructed in 2006, and we've identified in detail the specifics of the changes being proposed for this structure. Much of it deals with the renovation of the front porch and replacement of windows and doors on all sides of the building, as well, and removal and of some fencing. But in addition to that, they are also proposing a new 2-story addition at the rear of the house, and so there's a lot of square footage being added with regard to that. In addition, they're proposing a couple of options for a carport and some new sidewalk along the front edge of the property, and installing new xeriscape landscaping at the front of the house. And then there are also some slat screens, wood screens at the front porch, the upper level balcony in the rear, and at the east side of the proposed carport. We've reviewed the project and found that it's in compliance with all the regulations. With respect to the guidelines, there's a corrugated metal roof panel roofing system. We have provided you some insight into the durability and warranties on that material. And then in addition, they are proposing also cementitious fiber siding on the front and the existing structure, as well as cladding on all 4 sides of the proposed addition. And again, we've discussed in the staff report the details of the warranty and the durability of the material. And again, we have the issue of the 24-inch elevation, because this is an existing structure that is not elevated to meet that standard. We're not proposing that the applicant be required to elevate the building in any way, shape, or form, so we're suggesting to the commission that that guideline be waived in this case, and we're recommending approval of the project to the commission.
All right, thank you. Betsy.
I just had a question. I believe this is the house. This house was built under the not guidance necessarily, but under this committee's purview, and I think this is actually a better product than this project had tons of issues.
Wasn't this the one where the architect, the wrong plans actually got put in place, and yeah.
Yeah, we negotiated an appearance of this structure, And, I mean, that probably way improperly negotiated a decision on this, and they pulled a different set of plans out and built it, and they had to come back and ask forgiveness and ask us to okay this. And this is, in my opinion, much better. So congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's, the plus is that the house is only 8 years old, so structurally it's in great shape, and that's why we were thrilled to be able to do a renovation versus, tear down and start over. And we think the existing building, even though it's not what we would have done to start with, we think it's an exciting opportunity to do something unique and have a little fun with the roof and be able to gain a 2-story addition to have a view of downtown and make the home larger for the family. And the reason we're asking for so many options, probably wondered about that, is that unlike other building new in the Cottage District, funding is very much limited by comparables, when you go get a loan, and there's not really a whole lot of renovation going on. So it's been very challenging. They're close to getting a loan, but they haven't got it in hand yet, and they've had loans that have appraised this house at a ridiculously low price, and we're trying to get that up. And so we're just asking for options, so in case we have to start going to a more budget-driven project, we still want to make the outside look like it should, but we may have to scale back some things like the carport or do some other things that we've asked for, and that's the reason you see so many options there. But we feel like any one of these options would be a great improvement to the house, and we feel like it's consistent with the other architecture going on in the area.
I'll just say regarding the options, because I did have a question, so thanks for addressing it. I'm fine with the options and flexibility, especially in a situation like this, but I would just ask the architects on the commission to make sure that they're okay with the materials for all the variety of options that are being contemplated. Because, sometimes we're talking metal, sometimes we're talking hardy, so it varies. And then, Ken, the one issue, and of course you always do all this stuff great, but the one issue I had was with the parking and the carport, the potential carport, because, as you know, in the Cottage District, we really try to get that parking back and away, and I'm just concerned that on one of your options is the parking in the car is starting to creep toward the street, and I know that you did a little bit of that on 8th next to the Mason residence, but still even that was pushed kind of back, and can you talk about how you can make sure you're sensitive to that issue in the Cottage District?
Part of it was the existing conditions. Let me go through the slide here. If you can see here, there's their door to their kitchen, and we really are not doing anything to the side of the house here. And so the thought was they wanted to be able to get the groceries from the car to the kitchen, and that's the reason why you see in that one option we pulled it a little bit forward. And there's the back now. So you can see here, this is the image you're talking about where you're concerned about the carport. It's still, we thought it was still set back far enough, and then if you do this shows the 22-foot carport. If we do the longer carport, the concern was that we didn't want it to go all the way back to the porch area.
Okay, Betsy, not to put you on the spot, but what do you comment about this several times? What do you think about the carport being there?
Well, the history is, I'm not crazy about carports, but the history of this project is that it was intended, for some reason, I don't, totally against the ordinance, but it was intended originally to have the garage attached and about where the carport is. So not that I'm crazy about, I'm not crazy about carports, and I'm definitely not in favor of garage doors that face the street. That's totally against this ordinance, but I'm not going to redesign this thing. I think there's some design elements that go into creating it this way.
So you would, in summary, you would be all right if one of the options was to place the carport right where it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Ken?
Well, I just have one cautionary comment. If you do the butterfly roof with a valley in the middle, and you use the corrugated roof panels, and they're probably exposed fasteners there too, I would imagine.
Correct. It would be a neoprene gasketed galvanized fastener.
And you know, if you've been on as many roofs as I have, and you just haven't been around that long to have been on that many roofs, but I'm sure you're aware of the neoprene, the durability of the neoprene, particularly when the metal roof starts moving and stuff, the little short screws, and whoever puts it on, it's just I've never seen one that was 20 years old. You know,
I have actually seen them, not here, but in Austin. I used to live in Austin, and it's been an extremely popular roofing system there. It's
Yeah.
been around for probably 50, 60 years. But, I mean, there is a chance, you're right, over time you might have to replace gasketed heads, but in general I think it's as durable or more durable than a comp roof that we see going up. I have it on my own house.
Well, it's more durable for some things, but
Yeah.
I do.
And for that particular butterfly, you're right, that is a concern. So the game plan there is to do a TPO roofing in the gutter. Basically, we'd build it like flat roof with TPO, and then we would carry that up the roof a ways, and then have ice and water shield go up so that
That's good.
worst case we have ice damming. The water should not get underneath.
That's good. I was not questioning your
Sure. No, it's
wisdom or
a
your
good question.
skill. I just, whenever I see those, I generally caution people against them, but it looks fine.
With regard to the carport, and you know, the butterfly roof, I think the carport adds to that effect nicely, but on page A1, there's a rendering with the small carport. Are there renderings of the other two options, both the larger carport and without the carport at all?
Well, we have a straight-on shot here without it. That would be from the north, the street view, and then from the south. I don't remember if we have one with the longer. I think that's also the shorter. We may have not have put that in the packet. We dashed it in, I think, on, there's a dashed line for where it would go, I think, on, let's see. It's the sheet A3 from July 20, or let's see. It has the large text at the bottom. It's, I'm not sure if we don't have it on the slide here, do we, Michael? It's this sheet right here. Okay. Can I bring this up to you?
Yeah.
Okay. So this shows at least the outline of where we're talking about elevation. It doesn't
Okay.
fully render it.
Okay.
And in the framing plan, we show it outlined there in terms of the plan on sheet A3 as well. Right. Oh, you've got the mess.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Motions?
Move we approve it.
Okay, we have a motion by Robison.
Second.
Oh, second by ladies first by Donna Cervantes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's approved. All right, item 6D, 1724 Northwest 23rd Street.
The applicant is not here for this case. I can give you a little background on it, though. This is used to be a nail salon. It was demolished without benefit of a demolition permit or a CA. We are the ones, planning staff, that turned that item into the Action Center for citation, and that was quite some time ago, probably 4 months ago, and they finally came in with the application to formalize the demolition by getting the CA first and then following up with the demolition permit after the fact. Right now, it's a standing water problem, so we've turned that in as well. I'm not sure why the applicant's not present, but there's really not much latitude for the commission here. The building is gone. It's almost a formality at this point. I don't know that the building that was there was anything remarkable from a historical or architectural standpoint. Probably if they came in and did it the proper procedure and the proper sequence, we probably would have recommended approval of the demolition anyway. And then one concern we did have with this was that the building has been gone for some time, and we were concerned about it sitting there vacant for quite an additional amount of time. But I can tell you that we have received an application subsequent to this application for development of the site by adding on to the building next door and inserting a parking lot where this building once stood to provide parking for the expansion of the building next door under the same ownership. So it looks like that the owner is going to be responsible and come forward with a project that will meet all the criteria that we have for the site in the district, and I believe that was submitted, and it's on your agenda for August. So
you're saying basically that if we were to ask the applicant, well, what's going to be done with this, the applicant would say, stay tuned until next month. I'm going to bring in 2 pieces of property and show you what I want to do with them both. Okay. Any questions or comments for Michael on this one?
Got a motion?
Okay. Matt, did you
I'll just say I pass this property a lot, so I'm real familiar with it. I'm glad to see something's being done with it, because right now it's a hole in the ground. There's a change in grade of at least 3 feet, maybe more, and it's a standing water problem. I assumed it was going to be a parking lot because they remodeled the building right next door, but it's about time they're moving forward.
Okay, thank you for that. Betsy, did you want to make a motion?
Sure.
Okay. You had a motion.
I have a motion,
Okay.
yeah. I'll move for approval of the demolition.
Okay, that's a motion by Brunstetter. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, that's a second by Robeson. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, tell them you can go ahead and take it down. Okay, communications, the administrative approval report. You don't have to go through all these, Michael, but if there are any you want to talk about in particular, feel free.
Like the whole one.
Mostly it's just a few minor things here and there. Change to the OCCC project, a minor change to that project in Capitol Hill, sign on 23rd Street. A couple of changes to a bunch of signage and awnings on a stretch of buildings on the north side of 16th Street in the Plaza District. There was the last item there on the bottom of page 3 of your agenda is garage that stood behind a building that sits on the north side of 6th Street. And the city came through on that block between 6th and 7th and replaced the alley. And right after that, we had the heavy rains, and the water that flew off of that alley kind of undermined one of the footings of the garage, and the garage fell over on its own. So the applicant came in for the CA, and we approved that administratively because it was just a small structure. So that's about it.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Okay, so Communications B, Board of Adjustment. Did you want to talk about any of these? Maybe the 601 Northwest 7th Street was kind of interesting.
You probably, if you haven't heard already, the Board of Adjustment did sustain the appeal of the Lynn residents at the corner of Dewey and Northwest 7th. And that puts us in a position of issuing a CA for the project, but we're going to go ahead and do that. Then secondarily, item 2, there has been an appeal filed on the 14-unit project at the corner of Francis and Northwest 6. They had the 14 units and the issue over the 3 stories or the 4 stories and the density and so on and so forth. I wanted to point out on item B3 that item is in error. We have not received an application for a variance yet, and that's for the same project I just talked about under item 2, but the variance has not yet been filed for the private access drive with respect to the lack of a sidewalk being there. We expect that to come in sometime soon, but at this point it has not been filed.
Okay. Thank you. Lisa, I wanted to ask you about the Board of Adjustment. We, in that meeting about 601 Northwest 7th Street, we kind of got dressed down, didn't we, a little bit?
Yes, you did, but in fairness to the Board of Adjustment, that was at about 6:30 when the meeting started at 1:30 p.m., so I am giving them a lot of benefit of the doubt on temperament and patience. Their remark was that they thought the committee was too arbitrary in that decision. So just note that. I mean, this commission does not report, so to speak, to the BOA. But obviously we want our work and decisions to be consistent and consistently applied. So anything staff can do to help that, let me know. We'll talk through it some more at the next commissioner training.
Donna?
Just to clarify, was it arbitrary in approving the density or the height?
It was
Not the units?
the comment was made the committee, this commission was being very careful not to articulate that it was an issue of style, that, this concern about character and fitting in superseded, style. The Board of Adjustment could not see that it wasn't about style, and that making decision based on the style was arbitrary, that there was no basis for denying somebody because of the style if it clearly met the guidelines and regulations. It was tough.
I think the other point was that we had gone out of our way in the staff report to make a statement that that project did in fact meet all the regulations, and it did. And I think the applicant's attorney and the Board of Adjustment itself seized upon that statement out of the staff report and felt that, well, if it meets all the standards, then why are they denying it? And they weren't able to separate the fact between the regulations and the guideline, which is what the commission based their denial on, which was the guideline about the character.
Yeah, and it's not an issue, from what I've observed, unique to UDC. It comes up in HP Commission a lot because several HP decisions have been appealed in the last year and a half. And it's very hard for even design professionals to articulate what does compatible mean, what does character mean, and then for Board of Adjustment to also wrap their minds around what does that mean in terms of a basis for a decision point, in terms of it is or is not compatible, this is or is not the character. And it's such fine lines. I thought the board did a great job considering they had been at it for 5 hours that day.
And I watched our segment. I skipped all the oil and gas stuff, the prior 5 hours. And they seem like, they're reasonable people. They're trying to do the best thing. I thought it was interesting. I completely agree with what Michael said, that they seize on the staff report and in the attorney's representation of that to almost seem like, what's the big deal? It meets all the guidelines. And they didn't really tease it out, I don't think. I thought it was interesting that we denied it unanimously and they reversed us unanimously. So there's some systemic thing that's going on that may be inherent just in the way the codes are written that give discretion. Maybe form-based codes would do away with this sort of thing. But it's also interesting that they are required per the state ordinance to try the appeal de novo, which means as if we didn't do anything. And because we tend to be, I would completely disagree with them, we tend to be extremely conscientious and code-focused and also very focused on the character of the area, that when it then is time for them to determine de novo what the character of the area is, I'm going to throw out the possibility they may not be as close to it as us, so they may make different decisions than we would.
Right, and the commission in their motion stated, we always ask on denials, to have a finding of exactly what guideline are you citing that it did or did not meet, and the commission did that, and that was the basis. The BOA did use that in their consideration. One thing that I think was clouding the issue was the applicant's case that they had submitted before.
Right, that was. I personally just wish we had nailed that a bit better, because for those of you following along at home, they had submitted in 2011, and they had a parking area in front of the house, and so we kind of never got past that parking area, and then they withdrew. The staff report didn't really mention a whole lot about development pattern. Subsequently, in 2015, when they reapplied, the staff report cited development pattern as an issue. And what it seemed to me that what they did then was to say, look at the capriciousness. Basically the same house in 2011, no mention about development pattern. In 2015, mention about development pattern. What I wish we could have explained is, yes, but in February of 2013, the code was changed and that development pattern clause was inserted. So therefore, not only should it not have been mentioned in 2011, it would have been very strange for it to have been mentioned in 2011, whereas it was perfectly natural for it to be mentioned in 2015 after the code had changed to include that type of guidance. Anyway, what I would have loved to have said just now, that I'd kind of been rehearsing, I wish I could have said back in when it was before us.
Yeah,
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yeah, can I just respond to this real quick? When the case came in, they told the applicant, said, hey, we submitted this before, but we withdrew it. And so neither Michael or I even looked back at old staff reports, because all we heard was it was withdrawn, and then come to find, it was withdrawn after a lengthy debate at commission. But we only started researching that later in the process.
Right, as did we all.
Which it would have been helpful for everybody if we had had a grasp on that, even for the committee, because we couldn't report out to the commission what, if any, effect that had. But you're right, the guidelines changed, and the character and pattern of the district has changed quite a bit in 4 years.
Just a couple of things. One is, obviously, we spent a lot of time on it. I couldn't stay for the vote, but I know that we spent, a couple hours on that particular vote. That was a really long case. That questions are, could we talk about in our next workshop making sure that our motions are very clear as far as approval and denial, so that they are more likely to be held up in the Board of Adjustment? And then is there any wording that we can add to the ordinance to sustain those character issues that we're dealing with. And then thirdly, this is something that has come up before. Is there any reason why we should have a representative of our committee or commission at the Board of Adjustment to support our decisions?
That would be nice.
The Board of Adjustment, for their decisions, they get the staff report, they get the meeting video, and they get the minutes. And that is what they use to, and they get the regulations and guidelines, and that's what they use to base their decision off of. We have practiced, it's inappropriate for any of the committee members to attend and speak on behalf of the committee because the committee's decision and motion is recorded.
As Betsy said, though, I mean, we discussed this case for like 3 hours. Is it practical that the Board of Adjustment sat and watched a 3-hour discussion that we had?
I watch Board of Adjustment just about every week, and as far as I can tell, they are dutiful about watching the video.
You could hear some comments that I would say at least some people had watched it. But I would agree with what Michael said. The staff report in some ways does kind of become a proxy for the commission's point of view, for better or worse.
Even if the commission didn't agree with
But the commission's decision is in the minutes.
Well, it's there, and I agree.
It's not as fully detailed as like a...
I would say, for example, whereas I would say if you were here listening to us, we talked a lot about the faux materials and how, in terms of what does character mean, there are no houses, none, that have faux historicity in the cottage district. So that clearly is a defining feature that contributes to uniqueness per the definition of character in the ordinances. However, they never really addressed, there was some quick comment made about it, but what they really focused on was the staff report and talking about size and bulk. And as Michael pointed out, they kept seizing on that one phrase that it meets all the guidelines, and there was really only one BOA member who kind of was, maybe two, who seemed to be trying to tease apart that there's the kind of the setback limits and all these quantitative things, but there's also a qualitative part that is up to the UDC to decide. Otherwise, why even have the UDC? But I don't know, one thing I might add to the commission training is I don't know if there's a way of, when we're writing the staff reports, writing them in such a way that we're not saying, this is good to go, and so that someone who's not close to how we work here would look at that and think, well, planning staff said it was fine. What's the UDC all about getting, picking nits with it?
Yeah, I think the language, you guys, you and Betsy have really nailed it, I think. The language in the ordinances is vague, for one thing. If you want to say character, you need to tell them what that means. I mean, it means something to all of us, but I doubt that we'd all have 100% understanding of what that word means. And I've noticed in the design guidelines, certainly in our neighborhood, in my district, the design guidelines, and I was in on years of trying to write those, but by the time it came out, the specific language and guidelines are supposed to be general and interpretive to some degree, but the key features are the things that led to difficulties in reviewing the last two developments in my district. And I've noticed that about Cottage District because, when that word character came in, that was really before the character of that neighborhood changed. And so a lot of those changes came in right over the top of the word character. I mean, nobody's building bungalows in the Cottage District. And the design guidelines really need to bridge. I mean, if there's a goal for an area and everybody gets a sense of what that goal is, the goal is not, when we wrote those, when you went through and worked with the neighborhood, to get the staff work with the neighborhood to get the design guidelines and stuff worked out so they could build the houses that they wanted to build. Nothing changed in terms of the definition of character. And I just think that's part of the language that needs to change, Betsy, and I think that's a major goal, because it's hard to, I mean, I've been conflicted on a couple of them this year, and I wasn't really conflicted on that one, the one that we got overturned on. But how do you defend it? So that's all.
My point with the metal panel earlier and previously is that the way that the guidelines are written, they are so broad that they really allow just about anything. So there have been things in the limited time that I've been here that architecturally, I don't see how, it just doesn't quite, it's not Spanish style, some of the things that we've looked at. But when you go through the checklist, they do meet all the criteria. So in a way, they're not asking for architectural judgment. They're asking, does it meet these requirements? I'm curious, as it pertains to that specific property, it seems like context is relevant to this committee, and how context was addressed, because when I was speaking, it was not, I did not necessarily like the character, but really my point was more context, and the fact that they were referencing that this is, they would reference precedents except for when it applied to them and things like that. So to me, it was the context that is relevant, not necessarily the character, because the character, I think, I don't know, they're both subjective.
Jorge, what do you mean by context exactly?
To me, the context of the fact that, they had referenced that either the houses had that kind of old-time cottage look or they had the modern. Mm-hmm. So the context of an Italian Renaissance villa, in the context of these other types of architectural elements, seems out of place. So that's what I mean by context. It's not whether I like the faux brick falling off the building. That's a design issue that I didn't necessarily like, but again, it met the criteria. But from my perspective, it did not meet the context, because the context, the matrix of that neighborhood is made up by really two different types of buildings, and it met neither one of those. Mm-hmm. So perhaps beefing up the context might give us a little bit more substance, because fine, the materials need to be loose, because you never know what somebody might think of, but the context, the matrix that makes up the neighborhood is really kind of what I was, trying to voice.
One of the, echoing both of those comments, I have to say that one Board of Adjustment member made what I thought was an excellent comment right along these two lines, which is, so we're all struggling with what is character, what is context, and this, and I forget who said it, but the comment was, but how is a citizen who is living someplace else in the city and wants to move downtown, do they have to hire an architect, pay their fees, go through this entire process, hear us ruminate before they know what character is and what they can build? That there should be some way in the code or some way so that a citizen has an idea if they're going to be close to the mark or not before they spend all that money ahead of time or as they're going through their own process. I thought that was very valid.
That's true. That's why you've got to blend design guidelines. It's got to be a mix of specificity and general. And context is a good way to put it to me. I think that's exactly how I felt about it. It was just way out of context with anything. And it was unfortunate.
So with the cottage district, I know you want to get on. With the cottage district, how on earth do you do form-based codes?
I know.
That could be, with the terrain differences, it's just all over the place.
Well, yeah, and there is, there is the approach of just muddling through, which is you try to make it sufficiently vague but not too vague. You try to get good people on this commission. You have them make their best decision, and sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't stick, and that, the cost of it not sticking is lower than trying to get everything right all the time, and you end up with paralysis because your codes are way too long and big, or your areas change.
Wasn't that motion fairly convoluted? Because it seems like there was a wall height issue, there was the brick fall, I can't remember the specifics, but it seems like it was fairly, like we spent a long time coming up with the language that satisfied all the concerns, when I would say now, in hindsight, the big point of not approving it was context, and that perhaps we ought to be...
What was voiced in the motion, recorded in the minutes, and voted on in the approved minutes was the guideline...
Development pattern.
The development guideline.
And the use of faux, and then the lack of kind of scale and articulation. But that said, that was us trying to do our best job, spur of the moment. I think you have a very good point, which is, and by the way, the Board of Adjustment, the wall issue had been figured out.
Just real quick, on the wall, their drawings were in error where the topography was concerned, so the wall was not actually 12 feet high, it's actually 8. But that was shown incorrectly on the drawings.
But to respond to both your comment and Matt's earlier comment, yes, we can do a better job being very specific and really teeing up for a potential viewer of our deliberation to see what is the exact issue that they're dealing with. That said, that teeing up part comes 2 hours into the DVD they get, and given all the other demands on their time, I don't know if everybody is watching from front to back our deliberation.
And I will remind, we were, I think the motion was kind of teed up. We were going in a direction of a continuance and trying to guide them in a direction of getting approval maybe the following month. And they, surprisingly to me or unexpectedly, at the last minute said, we'd rather you just deny this. So I don't know that our motion was the most well-crafted, because we were kind of halfway down one path, and then all of a sudden we were asked by the applicant to deny it.
But there have been other motions, though, that there's one I'm thinking specifically that came back, and I wasn't here for the first round. But some of the concerns, maybe, like nitpicking on the wall's irrelevant if it's out of context. Right. And that perhaps in the workshop we can maybe work on how we craft motions in order to really kind of focus in on the critical parts, because if we're nitpicking because the glass is too shiny and they come back and change it, in fairness, and that was one of the things that, in fairness to those people, I would have rather had it rejected and let them take their course or accept it. But to nitpick it on certain issues, we had kind of focused in on maybe one specific context. That might have helped out a little bit.
Just in defense of nitpicking, sometimes you can get to a compromise, or at least get them to go back and look at the overall project. I understand exactly what you're saying, but sometimes we've had to nitpick in order to get a continuance in order for an applicant to bring stuff back, and they have an opportunity to kind of rethink their whole project. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, I just want to make clear, I think you guys did a great job. I think you always do. And I don't think anyone should take this as a defeat per se, because going for a variance or appealing something, it takes a lot of money and a lot of time. So it is in the applicant's interest to get committee approval with whatever conditions they have to do it. So this applicant chose a different course, and that's why the process is set up the way it is. So it sounds like everybody, staff and committee, we've identified some areas to work on so that we can improve going forward, and that's great. But I don't think anybody here should be second-guessing, their work or their vote or their decision.
Excellent. Okay, item C, Planning Commission. Lisa, did you want to talk about where we are in this process with the demo ordinance, or?
I have hot off the press news.
Oh.
It's going to be introduced on August 13th, final hearing August 27th.
Oh, great.
Thank you for asking.
And comments from the Planning Department staff? Any other things that you haven't already said? The comments from commission members, then I had a couple of questions. We've already talked on some of them. I will point out that as an introduction to this issue that the attorney for the Lynns did talk about Brian living in the district and that he should have recused himself, and then it also popped up separately. I'm trying to recall either in articles.
Yeah, it was in the Oklahoman.
Yeah, Oklahoman, and then also for those of you who frequent OKC Talk, it was echoed there a few times. So, and you sent out, I thought, was a very good email on it. Do you want to just kind of summarize that or add some color for everybody about that?
Sure. I think I personally have had the conflict of interest conversation with just about everybody here on at least one occasion. A conflict of interest is if you cannot be impartial in your action on a case, and only the commission member can decide that. Like, I don't know what's going on in Jorge's mind. I don't know. Well, exactly. I've known Jorge a long time, and I still don't know. But, obviously, if there's an obvious financial relationship, Ben alluded a little bit ago about a financial arrangement with one of the applicants. Frequently, Betsy's firm will be here with the project, so obviously it's a obvious financial conflict, but just being a neighbor is not. 4 of the seats on this committee are for property owners or tenants, and so that's in areas reviewed by this commission, and that's because you are a property owner or tenant that you understand the area and you have the area's interests at heart. So another example was, again, on HP Commission, 6 or 7 of their seats are for people who live in HP districts. So if they couldn't vote on neighbors, they would never be able to do business. So the key on conflicts of interest is we ask people when the agenda comes out, if people can immediately ask themselves if they have a conflict, and if they do, let staff know, because it could affect the quorum. But it is for the individual commissioner to decide. For the Lynn case, for example, or whichever, was it the Lynn case? If somebody feels that a sitting commissioner has, for sure a conflict, they can request that they not be a part of the hearing. So and even if, let's say, I'm going to pick on Jorge again, just because I'm looking at him. Let's say Jorge did have a conflict and did have a financial interest in approving or denying a case. Well, there's 8 other commissioners who are making the vote. So we see that there's a lot of safeguards against conflicts and their effect on the fairness of the process.
Well, just to add to that, the case today with Kayla Baker, that is not an ADG project, but she is a client, and I felt like it would be better for me to remove myself, even though I had no emotional tie to it. Corey Bates on DDRC recused himself because of a future relationship with a particular applicant, and it really is, it's got to be up to the commissioner. I think one gauge might be is if it's not a client, you can gauge it as to if you have a severe emotional reaction to the project, you might look at that and see if that is a conflict of interest.
especially on this commission, since there are 9 members, so we only need 5 for quorum. So if somebody's on the fence about whether or not they have a conflict, it would rarely affect quorum for someone to abstain or be absent. So,
Right. And
yeah, I don't
actually,
think anybody who's on the fence needs to feel that they must vote, because the process, for the most part on this committee, because it's so big, can go on.
And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe our bylaws are written such that you can abstain from participating, but still remain on the horseshoe and not
You can remain
present as it's defined in Robert's Rules or whatever. And so you're actually not impacting quorum if
Right, yes.
we don't have a large group. Do the applicants know, or do people in the audience know that if they think that one of us has a conflict, they can bring it up?
Well, I don't know if they know. We were, Rita and I were talking about this. We're not sure if people know that. We assume they know, and we're not sure how to make it more clear. So she and I are...
Another thing that Susan Randall told me once was that if it could be construed that you have a conflict of interest, but you don't feel like you have a conflict of interest, you can, at the beginning of the case, make a statement of disclosure about your involvement with the case, but that you feel like you can hear it fairly. And
ask the applicant to affirm that they agree, Just the step further would be like, yes, here's my situation, does it,
Is that okay with you?
Is that okay with you? They say yes or no.
I actually heard one Board of Adjustment, several years ago, one Board of Adjustment member make that statement that Betsy's describing. However, there was no request of the applicant. It was just more of a statement. Here's my relationship. Given that, I still believe that I can be impartial. And they were done.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, we just always want to protect the integrity of the process, and it's always better to declare.
Right.
And if anybody thinks something's misconstrued, just abstain, be absent. It's not a negative. It's just part of the process.
Right, right. And there also is the added issue of even if you know that you're not conflicted, there is the issue of what's the perception out in the audience or among the public, and that's something I think to be mindful of as well.
Yes.
Okay, anything more on this topic, or have we beaten it to death? Okay, my other question is, Plan OKC, now that it's been approved, how does that influence, if at all, what we do in here?
It does not affect Urban Design Commission.
So my specific question is, there are maps in there that show high density, medium density that cut across the cottage district.
Yes.
Are we supposed to look at those and apply those?
In the next year, I was going to say Michael, but I forgot. We hired a new senior planner in our division, and her job is to update the ordinances in relationship to the downtown framework. And because the downtown framework is kind of an offshoot embed of Plan OKC. So her job is to update. She's going to start with downtown, because the downtown development framework kind of carves up downtown into different character districts with more specific development criteria in each of those. So she's going to go through downtown, and that'll capture cottage in that. And so that no other areas of UDC are affected by the DDF. There are subtle effects of Plan OKC that will get woven in.
So our instructions are just wait until the code itself changes before we...
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Downtown Development Framework.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one in regards to when buildings get demoed, kind of the process. Are they getting fined, or do I just need to tell all my clients, hey, demo it, we'll just ask for forgiveness? Because, I mean, it seems like this is a bit of a there's that project up at Deep Deuce where they demoed the stair. So, I'm curious if there's at least some sort of penalty that goes with it before it gets over to this committee.
People are given violation notices and cited. There's quite a lengthy process to collect on whatever the fines are, and the goal of that whole process is not just to collect the fine or put people in jail. It's to bring them into compliance with the ordinance, which means you need a demo permit, you need a CA. I think in recent, Sparkle Nails, like I said, we drove by, Michael and I drive by all the time, so that was an easy catch. We phoned it in. It took quite a while, but the applicant finally came and is now complied with the process. 400 Walnut is still, I don't know whatever happened to that. They're appealing, last I heard.
I think they were continued.
Right, that's what I mean. They filed an appeal, but it hasn't been, nothing's happened. There's been no action yet. They asked for a continuance. Because they asked for a continuance.
Yeah, I don't
sometime in
think that
August.
they were denied a downtown, a DDRC. I think they were continued.
Oh, right.
No,
DDRC denied it.
Oh, okay.
And then they're
That's right,
appealing
that's
that.
right,
But
that's
the
right. And they
appeal
asked
has
for
been
continuance on the appeal.
continued
That's
to
correct.
sometime in August. So, does that answer your question? I think there's a mechanism to get everybody into compliance. And sometimes it takes a long time and seems like you might as well get cited, but I don't think that's the best course of action. Like, what are you talking?
Well, my meter expires, I get to pay a ticket, and you would, so you would think that if you do something without a certificate of authority, that you would have a bigger fine other than just a parking ticket. I don't know, at least a token amount.
Yeah, there's a fine. I don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah, one of the problems is the fines are, at least what we're told, is the fines are not necessarily severe enough to divert people from not complying with the code, and a lot of times they're willing to just continue to pay the fines rather than comply.
Small portion of all the, a tiny portion of all the work that happens.
Then a lot of, some cities will have in their regulations that if you do something in this fashion, that when you make the application to get the certificate of approval after the fact, or you make the application to get the demolition permit after the fact, that the fee is doubled or tripled. But that's not the way our rules are written right now, so.
Are there any other questions or comments? My last comment is to thank our audience members for being so patient, even though this feels like it's taking forever. Okay, next meeting date is in your agenda. If there are no objections, we will consider ourselves adjourned by unanimous consent. Thank you.